Welcome back to Power Drive. Welcome back, guys. In this video I will be upgrading an alternator on this 3rd gen Camaro. There's many reasons why you would have to upgrade your alternator. One of them being maybe you have a system in the car and it's not enough output from your alternator to power the system and everything else. Or in my case, I put dual fans in this car and dual fuel pumps and a bunch of other miscellaneous electrical stuff. And I'm probably at the limit of where this alternator should be. This video can also be used on how to replace an alternator. But different cars, the alternator is positioned in different spots of the car. Some are on top, easy to get to like this. Some are on the bottom of the engine, and some are front-wheel drive. Some front-wheel drive cars are all the way in the bottom. You got to take the wheel off, do it from underneath. It's a whole fiasco to get to it. So let me show you what I'm putting in this car. This is the alternator I'm putting in from Powermaster. It's a 140 amp alternator, and that's the part number right there. And this is what it looks like. They even tell you when they tested it how many amps at idle. It's 103 amps at idle, 128 at cruise, and top end was 159 amps. So that's what it looks like. We have to clock this, and I'll show you that. I'm putting a 4-gauge wire. They say that for a 100 to 105 amp alternator, you should use an 8-gauge wire if you're going up to 6 feet. Or for 140 to 155 amp alternator, you could use a 6-gauge up to 6 feet. And I'm going to go thicker, because thicker is always better. You could also Google a 12-volt chart to get the thickness gauge wire you need for how many foot run you're going to have and how many amps you're going to go through that foot run. So you could do that also if you're not sure. But always err on the thicker side. I got some battery lugs here, which are tinned. I got some heat shrink tubing. I got a slow blow megafuse. This one here is 175 amp. I got these terminal connectors for the battery. I got a megafuse holder. And I also have a wire insulator to keep you protected from the heat. Now if you're wondering why I picked a 175 amp megafuse, well, a rule of thumb is you should have a fuse that can handle 15% lower than the highest amperage rating of your thickness cable. So this is a 4-gauge, about 6 feet. You're looking at about 200 amps that this could max handle. So with the 175 amp fuse, you're about 12.5%, which is close to where you want to be. Also, you want this to be higher than the max amperage draw that the car will have when you're driving. And everything running. So let's begin. First thing to do is take the battery terminal off. Here I'm going to take the positive terminal off here. The reason you take this off is because this goes straight to the alternator, the power terminal of the alternator, and you don't want to ground it out and spark it out. Take the tension off of this and pull the belt off, just like that. The charge terminal, that's a 10mm, take that off. And there's a clip back here. You pop up the clip and pull it down. Now here you got 2 Torx bolts. This is a T40 and a T50 in the bottom. Okay. This just pops right out. Alright, so I'm going to make a little mark right here with the white out, because that's where I want this power terminal to be, because I'm going to actually take this apart, these 2 halves, and clock it over so it looks like this. It's like that. So I also have a video on how to clock an alternator. I'm going to put that link in the description below. But I'm going to show you real quick on how to do that. Now these bolts here, these are E8s, the reverse torques. Put that in there and unscrew these. And you can take these all off. I'm also going to take this pulley off, and over here I'm going to make a line down the middle with the nut and the shaft, just so when I put the nut back on, it's in the same exact position. So, right there. That's a 15/16 nut. Comes off just like that. And that comes off too. Okay, now all you gotta do is just pop it up a little bit, just like that, and move this around where you want it. And we made that mark over there. So that's good. I'm gonna go ahead and put everything back on. Put this back on the shaft. Put the pulley back on. Put the lock washer on. And once I tighten this down, these two marks should line up. That should be where the torque is, the final torque. A little more to go. A little more. And that's pretty much almost there. Perfect. One thing to note here, when you put this back on, make sure this spins freely. Sometimes the case is cocked a little bit and there's friction here. That's not good. This should be able to spin freely. Now I'm just going to go ahead and put these final bolts back in and tighten this case back up. Now I'm just drive these down by hand. Make sure you catch these by hand first, because it's an aluminum case it's going into. It's very soft threads. It's very easy to strip. It's hard to strip it if you do it by hand first, as opposed to impacting it on or using a ratchet. So I'm just going to drive these down and tighten them up. And we're done. Okay, now we're going to put the alternator back in. There's a little sleeve in here. I like to hit it back. Just to make some room for the alternator bracket over here. Now let's slide her in. Catch that. That caught. And now the top bolt. They're very generous in this kit. They actually give you a top 13mm bolt here for this. Go ahead and tighten that down. And that's good. And that's good. Okay, now this is the charge wire coming straight from the alternator. And that's a stock wire. I'm going to go ahead and unclip it from over here, like that. And then over here, it goes under, around, in there. I'm just going to cut it here. I don't feel like going through the harness. That's it right there. And then the wire is right here. Alright, so this is the lug I'm going to use. So I'm going to cut this wire around here with the box cutter. So go around. Make that cut. So once you make that cut, you just pull this right off. That should fit right in there. Alright, now I'm going to crimp this in here. There's different ways of doing this. You can use one of these crimpers. You just pop this up, put this in there, and you whack this down. You whack it down with a hammer and crimp it. They sell solder slugs you could throw in here, melt it and put it in. You can also crimp it with the solder in there. I'm just going to use my clown crimpers and crimp this in. I'm not going to use any solder. I'm happy with just crimping it, so I'm going to do that. Alright, so I put it in the crimper. Now I just insert inside the hole and crimper down. Yeah, baby. Look at that. Alright, so I'm gonna do a 90-degree on this. So I put it on the vise. I'm just gonna bend it over. Do what I do best. Just like that. That's a 90. Now I'm going to cut the tube, the shrink tube, pop this on the other end, and heat it up. And you're good. Okay, don't forget to plug this in. That's good. Now over here, the wire that we just made is going to go something like this. I'm going to route it down over here, away from everything. So I started the threads already. Go ahead and tighten that down. It's good. I'm just going to go ahead and bend everything out of the way, make sure it's not touching anything. Alright, that's what it looks like now. Nothing's touching. I'm going to go ahead and route that big fat wire and also put a heat protective barrier on it. Okay, now put a little bit of heat protectant sleeving over here, and I'm just going to join this in this loom over here and bring it over to the battery. Alright, so I just routed everything nicely, put everything together in the loom. Goes down there, stock location. I'm putting some more wrap on here, heat wrap. Bring this up in there. And this is going to go in the stock location over here. It fits just like that. And I'll probably put the megafuse down here and just route it up here to the other terminal. Okay, now I'm just going to cut this here and put a terminal there for the megafuse. Okay, so this is how you do it on the car with the crimpers. That's why the crimpers are really good. You can just go ahead and route it and crimp it as you go. And make sure this is oriented the way you want it, the lug. I want it flat like this, and it's going to go like this. So I'm just going to put it in like this. Beautiful. Yeah, baby. Look at that. Alright, so now we're gonna I put the megafuse in the holder. Put the lug over there. Put the nut on the stud. I made another cable. And that's gonna go over here. Over here. Now tighten these pair of nuts down. Down. Okay, now I'm going to put this terminal on here. Just like that. Alright, now connect this here. That's not going anywhere. And now reconnect the battery, and I'm also going to zip tie this down here with these other wires. So that's not going to go nowhere either. Belt on. And that's how you upgrade your alternator. It's also a good idea if you have powder coat accessories. You might not have a good ground on your alternator, because remember the alternator has to ground out too. It is recommended to put a cable that's as thick as the power cable, the same gauge, if you do have powder coat accessories and it's not getting good ground, to a good ground source. From the case of the alternator to a good ground source. And thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. See ya!